Officer refuses to let a black woman enter the court. Standing in front of the grand entrance, she tries to explain herself to the officer, but his eyes remain hard, his posture tense. He steps in her way, blocking her path. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're not getting through," he says, his voice dismissive, as if he has the right to control who enters. She remains calm, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, her briefcase in hand. "I'm the prosecutor for today's case," she states clearly, keeping her composure. The officer gives her an incredulous look, clearly unimpressed. "You, a prosecutor?" he asks, his tone dripping with skepticism. "You look like you're in the wrong place. Do you have clearance?" His eyes narrow, and he folds his arms, not taking her seriously. "I do," she replies, her voice steady but firm. "I've been assigned to the case. I'm here to do my job. Just let me in." But the officer's face hardens further. He steps closer to her, blocking her entrance completely. "No clearance, no entry. Those are the rules," he says arrogantly, as though his words are the final authority on the matter. The woman tries to remain calm, but it's clear the situation is escalating. What happens when a police officer targets the wrong person? You won't believe what happens when he discovers who she really is. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. The black woman stands before the courthouse, poised and confident, with a quiet yet powerful presence. Her attire reflects her professionalism, a sharp, tailored suit, a polished briefcase in hand. She walks with purpose, her head held high. As she approaches the entrance, she's focused, mentally preparing for the challenging day ahead in the courtroom. Little does she know, her peaceful, assertive demeanor will soon be tested. The officer stationed at the entrance looks up from his paperwork as she approaches. His eyes scan her figure, sizing her up quickly and dismissively. The way she carries herself, well-dressed and collected, would seem to suggest she belongs here. But to him, there's something about her presence that doesn't sit right. Without hesitation, he steps forward, blocking her path with a stern face. "Can I help you?" he asks, his voice sharp, his tone skeptical. The woman stops in front of him, unfazed. She looks him directly in the eye, exuding calm authority. "I'm just trying to get into the courthouse," she replies, her voice steady. "I'm here for work." The officer looks her up and down with a raised brow, dismissing her with a subtle scoff. "Work, huh? Looks to me like you're just another civilian trying to sneak in. I'm afraid you'll have to wait until I verify who you are." She stands firm, not moving an inch. "I'm supposed to be here," she says simply. "I'm a prosecutor." The officer narrows his eyes, clearly unconvinced. "A prosecutor," he mutters, not entirely believing her. His gaze is condescending as he leans forward slightly, eyeing her closely. "You don't look like a prosecutor." His assumptions are painfully clear. He sees her, her race, her appearance, and quickly writes her off as someone unworthy of the authority she claims. She must be someone trying to take advantage of a situation, someone not important enough to be in the same space as him. In his mind, she doesn't belong here. She holds her ground, her composure unwavering. "I assure you, I am," she responds, her tone polite but firm, refusing to let his dismissiveness get under her skin. But the officer isn't satisfied. With a dismissive shake of his head, he gestures for her to step aside. "I'll need to see some ID, he demands, his voice stern and commanding. "And I'll be checking your credentials." She takes a small step forward, still maintaining her calm. "I don't have time for this," she says. "You'll find everything you need if you simply check the list." His eyes harden, but instead of stepping back, he doubles down. His mind is made up. She doesn't belong. She's just another person who doesn't fit the narrative he's built in his head. As far as he's concerned, her word means nothing. The situation is set. A simple misunderstanding, or perhaps a preconceived notion of who she is about to escalate, unbeknownst to the officer, into something much bigger than he could ever imagine. In this moment, the black woman stands composed, ready to assert herself and challenge the prejudice that has been thrust upon her. But the officer, clouded by his biases, doesn't yet realize who he's dealing with. The black woman stands at the entrance of the courthouse, waiting patiently for the officer to allow her to proceed. She's been here many times before, part of her daily routine. She carries herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what she's doing. Her day has already been filled with tasks, and this is simply another one. But the officer steps in her path, blocking her way. His gaze sharpens as he stares down at her, clearly sizing her up. She looks at him calmly, not intimidated. "I'm afraid I can't let you pass," the officer says, his tone dismissive. His eyes flicker over her attire. A well-tailored suit, the look of someone who's accustomed to professional settings. But that doesn't seem to matter to him. He's quick to judge. "You don't have the proper credentials. You'll need to show me something." The woman looks at him with patience. "I'm a prosecutor here for a case," she explains in a calm, steady voice. "I've been here before. I've done this many times." The officer's eyes narrow, his posture rigid. "Prosecutor? I don't think so," he mutters. "You don't look like one. I haven't seen you around here before. I'll need to check your credentials." His dismissive attitude is clear. He doesn't believe her. Her expression doesn't change, but a flicker of frustration appears in her eyes. "I've explained this already," she replies, maintaining her calm. "I'm here for work. I'm a prosecutor. There's nothing to check." He holds up a hand, dismissing her once again. "I'm the one who decides if you get to enter, and you're not convincing me," he says, his voice getting more forceful. "I need to see ID." She doesn't argue, but her patience is starting to wear thin. She tries again, her tone still composed. "There's no need to check ID. I've already told you. You've seen me before. I've entered this building countless times. I don't have time for this." The officer's dismissiveness grows more pronounced. "Time for what?" he sneers. "You've got time for me. You should be following the rules, just like everyone else." The woman stands tall, keeping her composure. But inside, she feels the rising frustration. This is not the first time she's faced bias, but today, it's different. Today, she's determined not to let it slide. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she says, the calm in her voice a sharp contrast to the officer's increasing aggression. The officer leans in closer, almost as if he's daring her to defy him. "I'm doing my job. You're the one causing a scene." The tension between them builds as bystanders begin to gather, sensing the conflict. Some pull out their phones, recording the interaction, but none of them step in to help. The woman remains silent, taking in the situation, knowing that words alone won't change the officer's mindset. The officer has escalated the situation unnecessarily, but the woman keeps her cool. Despite his condescending attitude and unwillingness to listen, she knows that pushing further could lead to more trouble. She tries one last time to make him understand, but the officer doesn't seem interested in anything but asserting his authority. Little does he know, this woman is about to make him regret his assumptions. The officer stands in front of the woman, blocking her way. She's done everything right, calmly explaining her position and trying to defuse the situation, but he still refuses to let her through. Her patience, which had been unwavering until now, begins to show signs of wear. She knows she's been wronged, but she's determined not to escalate things further. "I've already explained who I am," she says again, her voice steady, but with an edge of frustration that she can't quite mask. I'm a prosecutor. I need to get to my office. This delay is unnecessary. The officer, however, remains unmoved. I told you. I need to see your credentials, he repeats, his tone even harsher this time. You're not getting through without them. No exceptions. She holds her ground. This is ridiculous. I don't have time for this. I've entered this building dozens of times. You've seen me here before. But the officer is not listening. His refusal to allow her entry grows more intense, and his posture becomes even more rigid, signaling his unwillingness to back down. With every word she speaks, he grows more hostile, treating her with the kind of dismissiveness that she's come to expect from people who judge her based on her race, not her position. Her face remains calm, but her frustration is building inside. The officer's blatant disregard for her words and his insistence that she somehow doesn't belong is starting to take its toll. She feels the injustice of it all, but she continues to remain composed, determined not to let his aggression affect her. As the tension escalates, bystanders begin to take notice. A few people in the crowd pull out their phones, recording the interaction, their faces full of concern as they watch the scene unfold. Some glance nervously at the officer, wondering if they should step in, but most stay silent. They're hesitant to intervene, unsure of how to handle the situation, and perhaps too intimidated by the officer's power to speak up. The woman, however, remains resolute. Her voice remains steady despite the pressure mounting from the officer's increasingly aggressive behavior. I have work to do, she says, trying to keep her composure. Please move aside. There's no reason for this to continue. But the officer is relentless. He continues to shout over her, interrupting her with accusations and instructions. His tone is no longer simply authoritative. It's condescending, laced with a sense of superiority, as if he believes she's beneath him. You think you can just walk in without showing respect for the rules? He sneers. I don't care who you are. You're just another person trying to skip the system. Her frustration continues to rise, but she refuses to lose control. The crowd around them grows larger as more people gather to watch, some of them recording, but still, no one steps in to help. The officer's aggression seems to fuel his power, and he's getting more confident with every word he speaks. The situation has become tense. It's no longer just about a woman trying to get into a building. Now, it's about her standing up against an officer who's trying to assert his authority by belittling her. And, as the officer's aggression reaches its peak, the woman's sense of justice and resolve will soon lead her to take the necessary steps to reclaim her dignity. The officer may have thought he was in control, but little does he know, this confrontation is about to change in a way he couldn't have possibly expected. The atmosphere between the woman and the officer has become increasingly tense, like a simmering pot about to boil over. The officer, still standing in front of her, refuses to move, his arms crossed firmly in front of his chest. His body language screams authority, but there's a certain rigidity to it now. He's determined not to let her through, convinced that she's just another civilian trying to bypass the system. The woman, however, remains calm, her posture as composed as ever. Her gaze never falters, and she speaks with a quiet assertiveness that seems to unsettle the officer even more. I've told you several times who I am, she says, her voice even, but there's an underlying firmness in her words. I'm a prosecutor. I'm supposed to be in that building, and you're blocking my path. The officer, however, isn't listening. I don't care who you are, he snaps, brushing off her words like they don't matter. I need to see your ID. You're not getting in without proper clearance. A few bystanders, now clearly uncomfortable with the situation, are pulling out their phones, quietly recording the exchange. Some mutter under their breath, but none of them seem willing to step in. They watch as the officer continues to berate the woman, treating her like she's just another nobody who doesn't deserve respect. But the woman stands firm, not flinching under the officer's harsh words. "I'm telling you again," she repeats, her voice unwavering. "I'm the prosecutor here. I'm an officer of the court. I belong here. I have every right to be in this building. So please, let me through." The officer eyes her suspiciously, still unconvinced. "You think I'm just going to take your word for it? What, just because you say you're the prosecutor, I'm supposed to believe you?" He sneers at her, his arrogance clear. "You'll need to show me some proof, miss." At this, something inside her shifts. Calmness remains, but the frustration that has been simmering beneath the surface begins to make its presence known. She reaches into her bag and slowly pulls out her ID, but rather than immediately handing it over, she pauses. She wants him to see something beyond the simple credentials. She wants him to see the weight of his actions. "I've told you who I am," she says, her words now slow and deliberate. "And now you will see for yourself." She holds up her identification just enough for him to see, but doesn't rush the process. She stands tall, her eyes locking with his, her posture still commanding and dignified. The officer looks at her ID briefly before looking up at her again, his brow furrowed, clearly skeptical. She holds the card steady in her hand for a moment longer than necessary, letting the tension build. It's only now, when the officer has seen the evidence in front of him, that the magnitude of the moment begins to sink in. For a split second, time seems to stop. The officer's eyes widen in disbelief as he finally comprehends what's happened. This isn't just some ordinary citizen he's been arguing with. The woman standing before him is someone with real power, someone who commands respect. She isn't just anyone, she's an officer of the law herself. She's the prosecutor. The officer freezes. His arrogance falters. The sneer that had been on his face slowly disappears, replaced by a look of utter shock. The realization hits him like a cold wave. His face pales as the true weight of the situation dawns on him. He's been disrespecting someone far more important than he ever realized, someone who holds authority over the very system he's meant to serve. And now that power has shifted. You're the prosecutor," the officer stammers, his voice trembling now, not with the same confidence it once held. His words come out in a rush, trying to backpedal, but it's clear the damage has been done. The woman doesn't respond immediately. She stands there, her eyes steady, never looking away. There's no need for words now. Her calmness speaks volumes. She's not angry, but the message is loud and clear. The officer has crossed a line, and he knows it. The officer, once filled with superiority and arrogance, is now visibly shaken, his bravado shattered. He scrambles for the right words to fix the mess he's made, but none come. His panic is evident now, as his face turns crimson with embarrassment. I'm sorry," he stammers, his voice shaky. "I didn't know. I didn't realize who you were." The woman watches him closely, but doesn't offer a single word of reassurance. She simply turns her gaze to the other officer, who stands by silently, unsure of what to do. The damage has already been done. The crowd around them has grown, and a few bystanders exchange glances. They've witnessed the shift in power, and it's clear that the officer's actions, once confident and unchallenged, are now being held up to scrutiny. The woman, with all the grace and dignity she's shown throughout the encounter, turns her back to the officer without a second glance. She's done. The matter is closed for her. She doesn't need to respond any further. The officer's head hangs low, and as the woman walks away, he's left standing there, paralyzed by the realization of just how badly he misjudged the situation. The air is thick with tension as the woman stands before the officer, the weight of the moment hanging heavily between them. After the shock of his mistake has settled in, the officer now fully understands that he has misjudged her, assuming she was just another ordinary person who didn't deserve respect. But now, she's no longer just anyone. She's a key player in the legal system, and the realization of this makes the officer feel small. She doesn't need to raise her voice. Her presence, her calm demeanor, and the unwavering look in her eyes speak volumes. She slowly takes a step forward, her heels clicking on the hard floor, her face impassive. She's not angry, but there's a firmness to her actions. "You've made a mistake," she says quietly, but with authority. Her voice is controlled, and every word is measured, not a hint of aggression in it, but undeniably powerful. "I told you who I was, and you refused to listen. You didn't treat me with the respect I deserve, and you didn't consider my rights as a citizen." The officer stands there, frozen. His eyes dart nervously between the woman and the other officer, who now seems just as uncomfortable in the tense silence. He knows his actions were wrong, but hearing her speak with such authority forces him to confront the full extent of his mistake. I didn't realize," the officer stammers, his face flushed with embarrassment. His tone is apologetic, but it's too late. The damage has already been done. The woman doesn't let him off the hook so easily. She pauses, letting her words sink in before she responds again, calm yet unyielding. "That's your problem. You never bothered to check, to verify. And now you've humiliated both yourself and me. But I'm still going to do my job." The officer, now visibly shaken, takes a small step back, and the apology spills out again. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. Please accept my apology." She nods slowly, not accepting or rejecting his apology, but acknowledging that he's aware of his error. She doesn't want his apology. It's not going to change the fact that she was mistreated. What she wants is respect, the same respect every person deserves. And now, with her authority firmly established, the officer has no choice but to stand there and take it. The woman doesn't waste another moment. With one last steady glance at the officer, she steps forward, moving past him toward the courthouse entrance. Her pace is confident and unhurried, showing no sign of the ordeal that just occurred. The woman doesn't waste another moment. With one last steady glance at the officer, she steps forward, moving past him toward the courthouse entrance. Her pace is confident and unhurried, showing no sign of the ordeal that just occurred. The officer remains behind her, silent and humiliated, his body language deflated. He watches her walk into the courthouse, his mouth still slightly agape in disbelief. The other officer, who has been silent throughout this exchange, doesn't know what to say or do. He stands awkwardly by, unable to meet her eyes. The woman's footsteps echo in the corridor as she walks through the door, leaving the officer to stew in his embarrassment. He watches her enter, still processing the mistake he made, unable to undo the damage he's caused. He stands there, stunned and speechless, as the moment sinks in. The woman, with all her grace and poise, has handled the situation without raising her voice, showing him exactly what it means to be a person of dignity and authority. And, for the officer, this encounter will be one he won't soon forget. The incident outside the courthouse spreads quickly, sparking outrage across social media. Videos of the interaction, captured by bystanders, circulate widely, with many people expressing their disbelief and anger over the officer's actions. The post goes viral, drawing in thousands of comments, with discussions about racism, police misconduct, and the treatment of black individuals, especially in positions of power. News outlets pick up the story, and soon it becomes a topic of national conversation. People from all walks of life share their opinions, and the woman's calm handling of the situation becomes a point of admiration. As the story spreads, a deeper issue emerges: the way individuals in authority often abuse their power when interacting with those they perceive as different or inferior. The woman's role as a prosecutor takes center stage in the discussions. As a respected legal professional, her position offers a stark reminder of the need for fairness in the system. She represents the very essence of justice, and her treatment by the officer brings to light a critical issue: that no one should be mistreated based on their race, appearance, or status. Her position also brings with it a responsibility. As the story goes viral, the woman uses her platform to speak out about what happened, advocating for better treatment of all individuals, especially marginalized groups. She takes to social media, posting a heartfelt message about the need for accountability and fairness in law enforcement. In her posts, she shares her experiences, not as a victim, but as a woman determined to push for change. She talks about the importance of respect for everyone, regardless of their race or position. She calls for greater transparency in policing and more opportunities for dialogue between the community and law enforcement. Her words resonate deeply with those who have faced similar situations and with those who are committed to fighting for equality. Many join the conversation, sharing their own stories of discrimination and harassment. Communities rally behind her, recognizing the significance of the moment. The woman's calm resolve has become a symbol for standing up against injustice, and people from all backgrounds unite in support of her efforts. The response is overwhelming, with public figures, activists, and organizations expressing their solidarity. The incident serves as a catalyst for a broader movement pushing for police reform, especially in how officers interact with marginalized communities. The conversation shifts toward the need for systemic changes that will ensure that incidents like this one become a thing of the past. The woman's actions have sparked something greater than just an apology from one officer. They've ignited a movement for accountability and respect. As the story continues to spread, her message becomes clearer. Standing up for what is right, no matter the challenge, can lead to real change. She uses her position not just as a prosecutor, but as a voice for those who are often overlooked and mistreated, proving that everyone has the power to make a difference. The story closes with a powerful message about the importance of respect and fairness in our society. The events of the day remind us that no one should ever be treated as less than human based on their race, background, or position. Regardless of where someone comes from or what they do for a living, everyone deserves dignity and respect. The lesson is clear. Standing up for what is right is essential, especially when facing those who have power. Even in the face of authority, we all must find the strength to speak out against mistreatment and injustice. It's not enough to remain silent when others are wronged. We each have a responsibility to challenge the systems and structures that allow injustice to thrive. This story emphasizes the importance of accountability, especially for those in power. When people with authority, whether it's in law enforcement, politics, or any other field, abuse their position, they must be held accountable for their actions. The woman's experience serves as a reminder that authority should never be used to intimidate or degrade others. Instead, it should be used to uplift and protect. Finally, the story highlights the powerful impact that standing up for what is right can have. The woman used her position not just to demand respect for herself, but to bring about change. She showed that authority and influence should never be used to perpetuate harm, but should instead be harnessed to fight injustice and bring about positive change for all. This is a call to action for us all, to use our voices, our platforms, and our positions to stand up against injustice, regardless of who or what we may be up against. The more we stand together and demand fairness, the closer we get to creating a world where everyone is treated with the respect and dignity they deserve.